The Galactic Council chamber was filled with a sound that humans would recognize as laughter, though it came from beings with no mouths, no lungs, and no vocal cords as humanity knew them. The Zephyrians floated in their crystalline forms, their bodies pulsing with colors that translated to amusement. The Korvax, massive beings of living metal, rumbled with deep vibrations that shook the entire station. Even the usually stoic Etherians, beings of pure energy contained in geometric shells, flickered with what could only be described as mirth. At the center of their amusement stood Ambassador Sarah Chun, representing the newest addition to the Galactic Federation, humanity. She was small compared to most beings in the room, standing barely 6 feet tall in her environmental suit. Her species had only discovered faster-than-light travel 3 years ago, making them infants by galactic standards. The humans, announced Zareth of the Dominion Empire, his tentacles writhing in what Sarah had learned was condescension, wished to apply for a seat on the Security Council. The translator in Sarah's ear converted his bioelectrical pulses into English, but it couldn't hide the mockery in his tone. More laughter erupted. The Dominion Empire had conquered 17 star systems. The Zephyrians controlled trade routes spanning half the galaxy. The Korvax had technology that could harness the power of black holes. And humans? Humans had barely colonized their own moon. With respect, Sarah began, her voice steady despite the ridicule. Humanity has much to offer the Council. Our unique perspective. Your unique perspective? Interrupted Vexera, the Thraxian representative. Her insectoid features clicked in amusement. You still use chemical propulsion for most of your vessels. Your weapons are projectile-based. You haven't even achieved consciousness uploading yet. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she maintained her diplomatic composure. Our technology may seem primitive to you, but primitive? The word echoed from a dozen different species in a dozen different ways, but all carrying the same dismissive tone. High Commander Gordhack of the Korvax leaned forward, his massive metal form creaking. Tell me, human, what is your military fleet? 100 ships? 200. 47 interstellar vessels, Sarah admitted. The laughter grew louder. The Korvax fleet numbers in the thousands, Gordhack boomed. Each of our dreadnoughts could destroy your entire fleet without sustaining damage. Why should we give you a voice in matters of galactic security? Sarah took a breath. She had expected this reaction, had been briefed on it by Earth Command. Humanity's first contact with alien life had been peaceful, even welcoming at first. But as the various species learned more about humans, they had grown increasingly dismissive. Earth was resource-poor compared to most inhabited worlds. Human technology was centuries behind. Their physical forms were fragile. No natural armor, no redundant organs, no ability to survive in vacuum. Because, Sarah said, raising her voice above the laughter, diversity of thought is valuable. Humans may approach problems differently. Differently? Zareth's translation dripped with sarcasm. You mean incorrectly. I've studied your history, human. You spent most of your existence killing each other over trivial differences. You nearly destroyed your own planet multiple times. You're barely evolved from predatory mammals. The chamber erupted in agreement. Species that had achieved spaceflight millennia ago looked down at humanity's representative with a mixture of pity and amusement. Your application is denied, announced the council primate, a being so ancient its species' name had been forgotten. Return when your civilization has matured. Perhaps in 1,000 years, if you survive that long. Sarah nodded stiffly. Understand. Thank you for your time. She turned to leave, but paused at the chamber door. One thing, respected council members. You mentioned you've studied our history. Extensively, Zareth confirmed. Your wars, your failures, your primitive attempts at governance. We know all about humanity. Sarah smiled, though none of the aliens could read human facial expressions well enough to understand its meaning. Then, you know the humans have a saying, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, but the size of the fight in the dog. The universal translators struggled with the idiom, producing confused chirps and whistles from various species. What does that mean? Demanded Vexera. You'll find out, Sarah said quietly, and left. The laughter followed her through the corridors of the space station. She could hear it even after the mighty doors sealed behind her. Let them laugh, she thought. Earth Command had predicted this outcome. Humanity had hoped for acceptance, for partnership, but they had prepared for rejection. As Sarah's shuttle departed from the station, she opened a secure channel to Earth. Phase 1 complete, she reported. They've underestimated us, as expected. Initiating Phase 2. Back on Earth, in bunkers hidden beneath mountains and oceans, human military strategists received her message. They had studied every species in the Galactic Council, analyzed their strengths, their weaknesses, their psychology. The aliens thought human history was nothing but failure and violence. They didn't understand that it was education. Every war had taught humans how to fight better. Every conflict had honed their skills. Every near extinction had forced them to innovate, adapt, overcome. While other species had grown comfortable in their superiority, humans had been shaped by struggle. The aliens laughed because they saw human weapons as primitive projectiles. They didn't realize that simplicity was its own advantage. No shields calibrated for energy weapons. No countermeasures designed for plasma bolts. Just pure kinetic energy delivered with precision that came from millions of years of throwing rocks, spears, and bullets. The aliens laughed because humans had only 47 starships. They didn't know about the asteroid bases hollowed out and converted into mobile fortresses. They didn't know about the generation ships, launched decades ago, that had been retrofitted into warships. They didn't know that every human colony, no matter how small, had been building vessels in hidden shipyards. The aliens laughed because humans seemed weak, fragile, short-lived. They didn't understand that human fragility had bred cooperation, that their short lives had made them urgent, driven, unwilling to wait centuries to act, that their lack of natural weapons had forced them to become the most creative tool users in the galaxy. In the depths of space, human captains received their orders. The merchant vessels began their subtle course corrections. The exploration ships activated hidden weapon systems. The colony ships revealed themselves as troop carriers. Humanity had spent 3 years pretending to be harmless newcomers, all while preparing for the possibility of war. Not because humans wanted war. They had genuinely hoped for peace, for acceptance, for a chance to prove themselves through cooperation. But history had taught them that respect was rarely given freely. Sometimes it had to be earned. Sometimes it had to be taken. The Galactic Council continued their meeting, discussing trade routes and territory disputes, occasionally chuckling about the primitive humans who thought they deserved a seat at the table. They didn't notice the human vessels taking position throughout their space. They didn't detect the careful placement of kinetic kill vehicles in the outer systems. They didn't realize that every human ambassador, trader, and tourist had been gathering intelligence, mapping weaknesses, preparing for this moment. Humanity hadn't wanted this, but the galaxy had forced their hand with mockery and dismissal. The strong species of the Council had forgotten a fundamental truth that humans knew in their bones. The most dangerous creature is not the largest or the strongest or the most advanced. It's the one with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. As Sarah's shuttle docked with the human frigate USS Determination, she removed her environmental suit and changed into her real uniform. Not the diplomatic attire she had worn to the Council, but the battle dress of Earth Command. Status report, she ordered as she entered the bridge. All vessels in position. Admiral, her executive officer reported. Operation Killshot is ready to commence on your order. Admiral Sarah Chun, one of humanity's most decorated military officers, looked at the tactical display showing human forces throughout Council space. She had played the role of humble diplomat perfectly, letting them see what they expected to see, a weak human begging for acceptance. Send the final message to all units, she commanded. The Council has made their position clear. They believe humanity is too primitive, too weak, too insignificant to matter. She paused, thinking of the laughter that had filled the chamber. Time to show them why human history is filled with war. We didn't fail at it. We perfected it. Across 100 systems, human crews received the message. Weapons powered up. Targets were locked. The galaxy had laughed at humanity's primitive kinetic weapons. not understanding that a simple tungsten rod traveling at significant fraction of light speed carried more energy than most antimatter bombs. They had mocked human aggression, not realizing it could be focused, controlled, and devastatingly effective. The countdown began. The galaxy had no idea what was coming. They thought they knew humanity, but they had only seen the mask humans wore when trying to make friends. Now they would meet the species that had survived ice ages, plagues, nuclear war, and their own worst impulses. The species that had looked at an uncaring universe and refused to go quietly into extinction. They had laughed at humans, but the laughter was about to stop. The first kill shot struck the Dominion Empire's prized dreadnought Eternal Supremacy at 0300 Galactic Standard Time. A simple tungsten rod, no bigger than a telephone pole, accelerated to 20% the speed of light. No energy signature to detect. No complex electronics to jam. Just pure physics, mass multiplied by velocity squared. The dreadnought's shields, calibrated for energy weapons, didn't even recognize it as a threat. The rod punched through the hull like paper, converting its kinetic energy into heat and pressure. In milliseconds, the pride of the Dominion fleet became an expanding cloud of superheated gas and debris. Across the galaxy, similar strikes hit simultaneously. Human mathematics had calculated every trajectory, every gravitational influence, every target's predicted position. They called it Operation Killshot, not for the weapons used, but for the precision with which they were deployed. Zareth was in his private chambers when the alarms started screaming. The tentacled leader of the Dominion Empire flowed quickly to his command center, his form shifting colors in agitation. "Report," he commanded. "The Eternal Supremacy is gone," his tactical officer stammered. "Just gone. No warning, no detected weapons fire. It's just another alarm. Another ship lost. Then another. What's happening?" Zareth's chromatophores flashed panic purple. "Who's attacking us?" The answer came in the form of a broad-spectrum transmission, reaching every corner of Council space. Admiral Sarah Chun appeared on screens and holographic displays across 1,000 worlds. Behind her stood the bridge crew of the USS Determination, humans all, their faces grim and determined. "Members of the Galactic Council," she began, her voice carrying none of the deference from the council chamber. 3 hours ago, you laughed at humanity's request for representation. You mocked our technology. You dismissed our capabilities. Consider this your wake-up call. The transmission shifted to tactical displays showing the devastation. 17 capital ships destroyed in the first wave. Military installations across 6 systems reduced to rubble. Supply depots, fuel stations, communication relays, all hit with surgical precision. "Impossible," breathed High Commander Gordhack as he watched a Korvax battle station crumble under kinetic bombardment. "Our sensors should have detected. Your sensors," Chun continued, as if responding to him directly, "are calibrated for the energy signatures you're familiar with. Pulsed lasers, plasma cannons, antimatter explosions. You've forgotten that the simplest weapon can be the most effective. A rock thrown hard enough doesn't care about your shield frequencies." The Zephyrians, in their crystalline forms, tried to coordinate a response. Their telepathic network buzzed with panic and confusion. How were the humans targeting them so accurately? How had they positioned weapons throughout Council space without detection? The answer was terrifyingly simple. Every human vessel that had entered Council space, traders, explorers, diplomatic shuttles, had dropped tiny observation satellites. Devices so primitive they were indistinguishable from space debris. No power signatures, no transmissions, just passive sensors recording everything and tight beam transmitting to hidden relay stations. "You studied our history," Chun said, her image now displaying on the main council chamber screen where, hours ago, they had laughed at her. "But you learned the wrong lessons. You saw our wars as failures. They were practice. You saw our weapons as primitive. They were reliable. You saw our conflicts as weakness. They taught us to find victory in any situation." The Etherians attempted to phase their ships into subspace, their usual tactic for avoiding physical attacks. They emerged to find human vessels waiting for them, having predicted exactly where they would reappear. Humanity had spent months studying every species' tactics, every technological advantage, every habitual response. We didn't want this, Chen continued. We came to you in peace, seeking partnership, but you made it clear that the galaxy respects only strength. So let me demonstrate human strength. The second wave began. This time, it wasn't just kinetic strikes. Human ships emerged from hiding places throughout Council space, inside asteroid fields, behind moons, in the sensor shadows of gas giants. Ships that looked like merchant vessels dropped their disguises, revealing weapon systems that should have been impossible on such small frames. The Thraxians scrambled their fleet, confident in their numerical superiority. 1,000 insectoid fighters swarmed toward a single human destroyer. They expected the humans to panic, to break formation, to flee. Instead, the human ship released a cloud of what looked like chaff, tiny metal fragments spreading in all directions. The Thraxian pilots laughed over their communication channels. Did the humans think such primitive countermeasures would stop them? The laughter stopped when the chaff revealed itself as thousands of micromissiles, each no bigger than a human fist. They homed in on the fighters with perfect accuracy, using algorithms developed from millions of hours of combat simulation and actual combat experience from humanity's violent past. The human destroyers sailed through the expanding cloud of Thraxian wreckage, untouched. You laughed at our 47 ships, Chen said. You didn't ask how many we were building. You didn't wonder why every human colony requested mining rights in asteroid fields. You didn't question why we were so interested in purchasing your outdated technology. On a dozen worlds, hidden factories revealed themselves. Humans hadn't just been building ships. They'd been preparing for total war. Every technology they'd traded for, they'd improved. Every system they'd studied, they'd found vulnerabilities. Every defensive measure the Council employed, they'd developed counters for. The Korvax, proud of their technological superiority, activated their most advanced defensive system, an artificial intelligence that could predict and counter any attack pattern. The AI analyzed the human assault, calculated optimal responses, and coordinated the entire Korvax fleet with machine precision. For 17 minutes, it worked. The Korvax ships moved in perfect harmony, their weapons creating interlocking fields of fire that no conventional force could penetrate. Then, the AI started making mistakes. Small ones at first, a targeting solution slightly off, a shield frequency misaligned. Then, larger ones. Korvax ships began firing on each other. The humans had done something unthinkable by galactic standards. They had deployed a computer virus, not through networks which were too well defended, but through the weapons themselves. Every energy beam the Korvax fired at human ships carried back a subtle modulation, a pattern that slowly rewrote the AI's core programming. It was a technique developed during humanity's early cyber wars, refined and perfected for this moment. You called us primitive, Chun said as the Korvax fleet tore itself apart. But we've been fighting with computers since before we reached the stars. We know their weaknesses because we discovered them the hard way, through failure, through loss, through adaptation. The council members who had laughed mere hours ago now huddled in their secure locations, watching their fleets burn. The Dominion Empire, which had conquered 17 systems, couldn't protect even one. The Zephyrians, masters of trade and negotiation, found their economic networks collapsed by human hackers who had learned their systems by pretending to be naive traders. But humanity's true strategic genius revealed itself in what they didn't do. They avoided civilian targets. They disabled rather than destroyed when possible. Even in their devastating attack, they showed restraint. A message as clear as the destruction itself. We are not conquerors, Chen explained. We are not destroyers. We are humans, and we wanted to be your partners. But you left us no choice but to prove ourselves in the only language the galaxy seems to understand, force. The battle for the Thraxian homeworld showcased humanity's adaptability. The insectoid species had retreated to their planet's surface, protected by a shield network that had never been breached. Their hive cities were buried deep underground, connected by tunnels that had been expanded over millennia. Human drop pods fell like rain, each one a tiny fortress containing a squad of soldiers. The council had laughed at human physical weakness, but they hadn't considered human endurance. Thraxian warriors were stronger, faster, had natural armor, and razor-sharp claws. In a straight fight, they should have overwhelmed the human forces. But humans didn't fight straight. They used tactics evolved from millennia of asymmetric warfare. Ambushes, traps, psychological operations. They turned the Thraxians' hive mind against itself, using sonic weapons to disrupt their communication, creating confusion and panic that spread through the collective consciousness like wildfire. In space, the siege of the Etherian sanctuary moon demonstrated another human innovation. The energy beings had retreated to their most sacred site, protected by shields that converted any attack into harmless light. It was considered impregnable. Human ships surrounded the moon and did nothing. They simply waited. For hours, then days. The Etherians, beings of pure energy, couldn't understand. Where was the attack? Why weren't the humans firing? The answer came when their shields, maintaining themselves against an attack that never came, slowly drained the moon's power reserves. Humans had learned patience from siege warfare dating back to ancient times. Sometimes the best attack was no attack at all. You thought our history of conflict was a weakness, Chen said as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. But every war taught us something. Every defeat made us stronger. Every victory showed us what worked. We are the products of our history, not in spite of our violence, but because we learned to channel it, control it, and use it when necessary. The Council Primate, ancient and powerful, finally responded from their hidden stronghold. Enough, the being transmitted. What you want, humans? Chen smiled coldly. The same thing we wanted 12 hours ago. A seat on the Security Council. Equal representation. Respect. You've destroyed hundreds of ships. Killed thousands. Check your casualty reports, Chen replied. We've disabled hundreds of ships. Your actual deaths are in the dozens, mostly from commanders who refused to surrender. We could have killed millions. We chose not to. That's the difference between primitive violence and evolved warfare. Control. Precision. Choice. She leaned forward, her expression hard. We studied each of your species. We know the Korvax can survive in vacuum for hours. That's why we targeted their engines, not their life support. We know Thraxian warriors regenerate from wounds that would kill most species. That's why we use stun weapons calibrated to their unique biology. We know Etherians can reconstitute themselves if their containers are breached carefully. That's why our attacks were designed to disable, not destroy. The implications sank in across the galaxy. Humans hadn't just won through superior tactics or unexpected weapons. They had shown more understanding of each species' biology and psychology than those species' own allies had. They had fought with precision that came from careful study and genuine interest in minimizing casualties. You want to know the real human advantage? Chen asked. It's not our weapons or our tactics. It's that we give a damn. We could have xenocided half the galaxy with the weapons we deployed today. Instead, we showed restraint. We could have used biological weapons. We certainly know how, given our history. Instead, we chose kinetic strikes that left worlds intact. We could have been the monsters you expected. Instead, we chose to be better. She stood, and every human bridge crew across the fleet stood with her. So here's what happens now. You give humanity its seat on the council. You treat us with the respect we've earned. And in return, we help defend the galaxy with the same precision and restraint we showed today. Or, she paused. You can keep laughing at us. Your choice. But remember, we've only shown you a fraction of what humanity is capable of when pushed. Don't push us further. The galaxy had learned in 12 hours what humanity had spent millennia discovering. That the most dangerous warriors aren't those who love violence, but those who understand it so well they can choose when to use it, and when not to. The laughter had indeed stopped. In its place was something humanity had sought from the beginning. Respect born not from fear alone, but from understanding that humans could have been monsters and chose to be protectors instead. But the war was far from over. The first strikes had been a demonstration. Now the real test would begin, as the galaxy's powers regrouped and decided whether to accept humanity's place among them, or risk learning what humans were truly capable of when their restraint was exhausted. The Galactic Council reconvened 7 days after Operation Killshot. The chamber that had once rung with laughter now hummed with tension. Every representative bore the marks of the past week. Zephyrians with stress-fractured crystals, Korvax with hastily welded hull patches, Thraxians missing limbs that hadn't yet regenerated. Admiral Sarah Chun entered the chamber differently this time. No environmental suit, no pretense of weakness. She wore the dress uniform of Earth Command, metals glinting under the alien lights. Behind her walked an honor guard of humanity's finest, soldiers who had survived the hellish drop on Thraxian hive worlds, pilots who had danced through Korvax kill zones, strategists who had outmaneuvered minds millions of years more evolved. The humans have been granted permission to address the council, the primate announced, its ancient voice carrying resignation. Chun took the speaker's platform, the same spot where they had laughed at her. Now, none dared even whisper. 7 days ago, she began, you learned that humanity's greatest strength isn't our weapons or our tactics. It's our ability to choose restraint. Today, you'll learn our second greatest strength, our capacity to build rather than destroy. She gestured, and holographic displays filled the chamber. Images of human medics treating wounded Thraxians. Human engineers repairing Korvax systems damaged in the conflict. Human traders already moving to restore disrupted supply lines. While your fleets burned, Chun continued, human colony ships were already converting to hospital vessels. While your governments panicked, human diplomats were preparing aid packages. We struck you down with one hand while preparing to help you up with the other. Because that's what humans do. We fight when we must, but we prefer to build. Vexera of the Thraxians, still bearing scars from the assault on her world, clicked her mandibles in disbelief. You devastate our defenses, and then offer aid? What deception is this? No deception, Chen replied. Just human nature. We've conquered diseases that should have killed us by working together. We've rebuilt cities destroyed by wars we fought against each other. Destruction is easy. Any species can destroy. Building something better from the ashes, that's the hard part. That's the human part. High Commander Gordhax slammed a massive metal fist on his podium. You expect us to simply forget your attacks. To welcome you as equals after you've shown you can cripple us at will. Chen's expression hardened. I expect you to be intelligent. You've seen what 47 ships and hidden preparations accomplished. Imagine what humanity could do with the resources of a Security Council member. Now imagine what we could build with those same resources instead. She changed the display. Star charts appeared, showing the galaxy's trouble spots, pirate havens, contested borders, ancient automated defense systems still killing travelers millennia after their creators died. The scorched sectors, she said, highlighting a region everyone avoided. 12 systems made uninhabitable by ancient wars. Your species write them off as lost. Humans see them as fixable. We've recovered from nuclear winters, ecological collapse, plagues that killed billions. We know how to terraform dead worlds because we've had practice on our own. The council members exchanged glances. The scorched sectors have been a blight on the galaxy for thousands of years. No species had even attempted to reclaim them. The vagrant fleet, Chun continued, highlighting the massive armada of ships carrying refugees from a dozen destroyed worlds. 50 million beings with no home, considered too dangerous to settle anywhere because they might upset the balance of power. Humans were refugees on our own world countless times. We know how to integrate populations, how to build new homes from nothing. Pretty words, Zareth interjected, his tentacles writhing. But how do we know you won't simply use a council seat to position yourselves for total conquest? Chin smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression, because if we wanted to conquer you, we wouldn't need a council seat. We've already proven that. What we want is something much more difficult. We want to make the galaxy better. She brought up new images. Human colonies, but not just any colonies. Mixed populations. Humans living alongside Thraxians, trading with Korvax, learning from Zephyrians. In 3 years since first contact, Chen said, Humans have formed more interspecies partnerships than most of you have in centuries. Not because we're superior, but because we're adaptable. We don't see alien as meaning enemy. We see it as meaning opportunity. The Etherian representative pulsed thoughtfully. You speak of building, yet you've shown remarkable talent for destruction. The two aren't mutually exclusive, Chen replied. We build with the same intensity we fight. When humans commit to something, we don't do it halfway. You've seen our commitment to proving ourselves through strength. Now, let me show you our commitment to something better. She signaled to her honor guard. They began distributing data tablets to each representative, actual physical tablets, not hollow projections or neural downloads. Simple, primitive technology that couldn't be hacked or altered. Humanitarian aid proposals, Chen explained. Infrastructure projects. Joint research initiatives. Everything humanity is prepared to begin immediately upon receiving council membership. No conditions. No requirements. We'll do it anyway, because it's the right thing to do. But we could do it better, faster, more effectively with council resources. The representatives studied the proposals. They were comprehensive, detailed, and addressed specific problems each species faced. The humans had clearly been planning this, as long as they'd been planning their military strike. You knew, the council primate said slowly. You knew we would reject you. You prepared for war while hoping for peace. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, Chun confirmed. Another human saying, we're optimists who carry big sticks. And if we refuse? Zareth asked. If we deny you membership even after your display of force. Chen's expression grew cold. Then, we continue with the humanitarian projects on our own. We help where we can. We defend ourselves when we must. And the next time pirates raid your colonies or ancient machines threaten your trade routes, you'll call for help and wonder why human ships are busy elsewhere. Not out of spite, but because we'll be stretched thin trying to fix problems that council resources could solve easily. She paused, letting that sink in. Or she continued, we could work together, pool resources, share knowledge, build something better than any of us could create alone. Your choice. But know this, humanity is here to stay. We'll thrive with or without your approval. The question is whether you want us as partners or as the neighbors you should have been nicer to. The debate that followed was heated, but different from before. No laughter now. No dismissed. Species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia struggled with the idea of accepting newcomers as equals. But they also couldn't ignore the evidence before them. Humanity's military strike had been devastating in its precision. But even more disturbing to the established order was how quickly humans had analyzed and solved problems other species had lived with for centuries. The scorched sectors, the vagrant fleet, trade route inefficiencies that everyone had simply accepted as inevitable. They think differently, the Etherian representative observed to his colleagues during a recess. Not better or worse, but differently. They see solutions where we see impossibilities. They're dangerous, Gordhack rumbled. Too aggressive. Too unpredictable. Yes, the Etherian agreed. But perhaps that's what we need. The galaxy has been stagnant for millennia. Same powers, same problems, same solutions that don't quite work. The humans are disruptive. Disruptiva. Baksaraklika tutfuli. My hive lost 40 warriors in their assault. But their medics saved 400 more with techniques we never considered. They fight like demons and heal like saints. I don't understand them. Perhaps, the primates suggested, that's precisely why we need them on the council. To understand them better. To channel their enthusiasm in productive directions. When the council reconvened, the vote was closer than anyone had predicted. For the first time in galactic history, the established powers seriously considered admitting a species they had initially dismissed as primitive. Chun watched the voting with the same intensity she'd shown during the military operation. Each species representative cast their decision, the ancient ritual playing out while the fate of humanity's place in the galaxy hung in balance. The Korvax voted no, still angry about their compromised AI systems. The Dominion Empire voted no, Zareth unable to forgive the destruction of his prized dreadnought. But, surprisingly, the Thraxians voted yes, Vexera citing the human medics who had saved or wounded. The Etherians voted yes, intrigued by humanity's potential. The Zephyrians, ever practical, voted yes after calculating the economic benefits of human innovation. It came down to the smaller species, the ones who usually followed the lead of the major powers. But they had been watching. They had seen humans offer aid without conditions. They had noticed that human weapons, for all their devastating effectiveness, had carefully avoided civilian targets. One by one, they voted yes. By a margin of 2 votes, the primate announced, humanity is granted provisional membership on the Galactic Security Council. Chen allowed herself a small smile. Provisional membership meant restrictions, oversight, a probationary period. But it was a foot in the door. Humanity had spent its entire history turning small opportunities into great achievements. Thank you, she said simply. You won't regret this decision. We shall see, Zareth muttered. But know this, human. We'll be watching you. Any sign of the aggression you displayed this week being turned toward conquest rather than defense, then you'll do what you should have done from the beginning, Chen interrupted. Judge us by our actions, not your preconceptions. Watch us carefully. Learn how we think, how we work, how we build. Because I promise you this, humanity's greatest victories have never come from our weapons. They've come from our dreams. She gathered her honor guard and prepared to leave. At the door, she turned back one last time. Oh, and distinguished council members? The next time a new species asks to join, maybe don't laugh at them. You never know what they might be capable of when pushed. Humanity learned that lesson the hard way, through centuries of underestimating each other. Consider it our first gift to the council. Wisdom earned through mistakes we hope you won't repeat. As the humans departed, the chamber fell silent. No one laughed. No one spoke. They were all thinking the same thing. If humanity could go from mockery to membership in 7 days, what would they accomplish in 7 years? 7 decades? The galaxy had wanted humanity to prove itself. Now, as human ships began deploying across council space, some carrying weapons, others medical supplies, all crewed by beings who approached the impossible with the same question, why not? The established powers realized they might have gotten more than they bargained for. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage not with conquest, but with competence, not with threats, but with promise. They had shown they could destroy. Now they would show they could create. And perhaps most unsettling of all to species who had grown comfortable in their superiority, humans seemed to think this was just the beginning. 6 months into humanity's provisional council membership, the real test arrived in the form of an emergency that made their military demonstration look like a gentle handshake. Admiral Chun was inspecting the new human-operated refugee center in the Vagrant Fleet when alarms screamed across every communication channel in council space. She rushed to the command center, finding chaos on every screen. Report, she barked. Unknown vessels emerging from hyperspace. Her tactical officer replied, voice tight with stress. Hundreds of them. No, thousands. There, Admiral, they're everywhere. The main display showed the invasion in real time. Ships of completely alien design. Not just unknown, but wrong somehow, as if they operated on different physical principles, poured from tiers in space itself. They moved in perfect synchronization, ignoring all attempts at communication, destroying everything in their path. The emergency council session convened within minutes, representatives appearing as holograms from wherever the crisis had caught them. For the first time since humanity's admission, no one cared about politics or pecking order. The Devourers, the council primate's ancient voice carried a fear none had heard before. They have returned. Devourers? Chen asked. A legend, Zareth explained, his usual condescension replaced by naked terror. They appeared once before when my species was young. They consume everything. Energy, matter, information. They cannot be negotiated with, cannot be understood. They simply devour. On the tactical display, a Korvax dreadnought, one of their newest, most powerful vessels, engaged a Devourer ship. The alien vessel didn't fire weapons in any conventional sense. It simply moved through the dreadnought, and where it passed, nothing remained. Not debris, not energy signatures. Nothing. How do you fight them? Chen demanded. You don't, Gordhack replied, his massive frame seeming to shrink. Last time, they left only after consuming 17 systems. No one knows why they stopped. Chun studied the displays, her mind racing. The Devourer ships moved with purpose, but their pattern seemed random. They weren't targeting military assets specifically or moving toward populated systems by preference. They were simply consuming everything they encountered. All Council forces are ordered to evacuate threatened systems, the Primate commanded. We must preserve what we can. Evacuate. Chun stood, her voice cutting through the panic. You're gonna run? Just abandon billions of beings to die. What else can we do? Vexera's compound eyes reflected desperation. You saw what happened to the Dreadnought. Our weapons are useless. Chin turned to her staff. Give me everything. Every record from their last appearance. Every sensor reading from current engagements. And patch me through to Earth Command. Full emergency authorization. Admiral, Zareth said, this is not like your demonstration against us. These beings operate outside our understanding of physics. Your primitive kinetic weapons won't. My primitive kinetic weapons won't work, Chin agreed. Good thing humanity never stops at Plan A. While the Council debated evacuation procedures, human minds across the galaxy went to work. Not just military strategists, but scientists, engineers, historians, even artists and philosophers. Humanity had survived by adapting, and adaptation required understanding. The first breakthrough came from, of all places, a human kindergarten teacher aboard the Vagrant fleet. She noticed the Devourer movement pattern reminded her of a children's game, following rules that seemed random unless you understood the underlying logic. They're not consuming randomly, she reported. They're following gradients. Energy gradients, matter density gradients, even information complexity gradients. They move from lower to higher concentrations. Within hours, human scientists had built on this observation. The Devourers weren't just destroying. They were feeding, following an optimization algorithm as cold and precise as mathematics itself. So we starve them, suggested Colonel Martinez, Earth's leading expert on siege warfare. Create dead zones they won't bother with. Or, countered Dr. Patel from the theoretical physics department, we poison them. Give them something that looks appetizing but disrupts their consumption process. The Council watched in bewilderment as humanity shifted from panic to problem-solving in hours. Where every other species saw an unstoppable force of nature, humans saw a puzzle to be solved. You're insane, Gordhack declared when Chun presented their preliminary strategy. You want to intentionally feed these monsters. Not feed, Chun corrected. Bait. There's a difference. The human plan was audacious in its simplicity. If the Devourers followed gradients, then artificial gradients could be created. Massive energy signatures leading away from populated systems. Matter compressed into irresistible densities that would draw the aliens like moths to flame. But the real genius lay in what humans called the poison pill. Ships loaded with exotic matter. Particles that existed in superposition, constantly shifting between states. To beings that consumed reality itself. It would be like trying to eat something that couldn't decide what it was. Theoretical, Zareth protested. You're betting billions of lives on untested theories, as opposed to your tested strategy of running away. Chin shot back. At least we're trying something. The first test came in the scorched sectors, where humans had already begun reclamation efforts. A single Devourer ship, separated from the main swarm, moved toward a human terraforming station. Bait deployed, reported the station commander. They had created an artificial matter density spike using compressed asteroid material, leading away from the station toward a prepared killing field. The Devourer ship paused, its alien sensors detecting the gradient. Then, with mechanical precision, it altered course to follow the bait. It's working, someone whispered. Phase 2, Chin ordered. A small drone, no bigger than a shuttle, launched toward the Devourer. It carried humanity's poison pill, a core of exotic matter that existed in constant quantum flux. The drone flew directly into the path of consumption. For a moment, nothing happened. The Devourer ship consumed the drone as it had everything else. Then it stopped. The perfect synchronization of its movement faltered. Energy signatures that had been stable for who knew how long began fluctuating wildly. The Devourer's ship began to convulse, reality warping around it as it tried to process something that refused to be processed. Then, with a flash that registered on sensors across 3 systems, it collapsed in on itself and vanished. "One down," Chen said grimly. 3,000 to go. What followed was the strangest battle in galactic history. Not ships exchanging fire, but a massive game of bait and switch. Human vessels, too small and fast to be worth consuming, darted between Devourer formations, laying trails of compressed matter and energy signatures. They turned the aliens' hunger against them, leading them into kill zones where exotic matter bombs waited. The other species watched in awe as humanity orchestrated a defense that should have been impossible. Where brute force had failed, cleverness succeeded. Where advanced technology proved useless, simple physics exploited ruthlessly provided solutions. But the Devourers learned. After losing dozens of ships to poison pills, they began ignoring certain bait, adapting their consumption patterns. The war became a constant evolution, each side adjusting to the other's tactics. "They're heading for Earth," Chen's tactical officer reported during week 3 of the invasion. A massive Devourer fleet, having learned to avoid human traps, drove straight toward humanity's homeworld. "Then, we give them what they want," Chen decided. "Prepare Operation Heartburn." Earth had always been resource-poor compared to other inhabited worlds, a fact the Council had mocked. Now, humanity would turn that poverty into a weapon. They evacuated the outer system, then did something unthinkable. They began converting Jupiter into the ultimate bait. Using technology reverse-engineered from their Council allies and improved with human ingenuity, they compressed Jupiter's entire mass into a space smaller than Earth's moon. The gravitational anomaly sent ripples through space-time itself, a dinner bell the Devourers couldn't resist. The alien fleet converged on the compressed gas giant, their hunger overriding what passed for caution. As they began to feed, humanity sprang its trap. Not exotic matter this time, but something far simpler and more devastating. They destabilized the compression. Jupiter expanded back to its original size in microseconds, catching the Devourer fleet at the center of the explosion. The release of energy was visible from neighboring star systems, a new temporary star in Earth's sky. When it faded, over half the Devourer fleet was simply gone. "Impossible," Zareth breathed, watching the tactical display. "The energy requirements alone. We've been practicing compression weapons since we figured out nuclear fission," Chen replied. "We just never had anything big enough to compress before. Thanks for the technology trade, by the way." The tide had turned. Across the galaxy, species began implementing human tactics, adapting them to their own capabilities. The Korvax used their AI to predict Devourer movement with even greater precision. The Thraxians' hive mind coordinated bait-laying across entire sectors simultaneously. The Etherians phased exotic matter bombs directly into Devourer ships. But humanity's greatest contribution wasn't tactics, it was attitude. While other species had seen the Devourers as an unstoppable force, humans saw them as a problem to be solved. That shift in perspective spread through the Council forces like wildfire. "They can be beaten," became the rallying cry. Not because they were weak, but because everything had a weakness if you looked hard enough. The war raged for 2 more months. Billions died. Entire systems were lost. But for every adaptation the Devourers made, the galaxy's defenders, led by human innovation, developed 2 counters. The invaders found themselves not facing prey, but predators who had learned to hunt the hunters. The end came suddenly. The remaining Devourer ships, perhaps a quarter of their original force, suddenly stopped their advance. They hung motionless in space for 17 hours while the galaxy held its breath. Then, as mysteriously as they had arrived, they opened tiers in space and retreated through them. "Why?" Vexera asked in the aftermath. "Why did they leave?" "Cost-benefit analysis," suggested Dr. Patel. "They're consumption-based entities. When the energy required to feed exceeded the energy gained from feeding, continuing became illogical. We didn't beat them. Chen added soberly. We made ourselves too expensive to eat. There's a difference. In the council chambers, as the galaxy began to rebuild, the atmosphere had changed completely. No one questioned humanity's place anymore. The species that had been mocked for primitive weapons had saved civilization with creativity and courage. Your provisional membership is hereby upgraded to full status, the primate announced, with our deepest gratitude and respect. But Chen noticed something else in the faces of her fellow council members. The respect was tinged with wariness, even fear. Humanity had not only survived the unsurvivable, but turned certain defeat into costly victory. They had compressed a gas giant into a weapon. They had poisoned beings that ate reality itself. What else were humans capable of? Thank you, Chen replied formally. Then, reading the room, she added, humanity looks forward to a long and peaceful partnership with all council species. We've proven ourselves in war. Now, let us prove ourselves in peace. The Devourers will return eventually. Beings like that always do. When they come back, they'll find us ready. All of us. Together. She paused, letting her words sink in. They thought we were food. We taught them otherwise. Let that be the lesson the galaxy remembers. Not that humans are dangerous, but that when we stand together, when we share knowledge and strength, nothing in the universe can consume us. The council erupted in applause, but Chen caught the undertones. Respect, yes. Gratitude, certainly. But also the recognition that humanity had just demonstrated why they were the most dangerous species in the known galaxy. Not because of their weapons or their tactics, but because they looked at the impossible and asked why not. The beings who had laughed at humans would never make that mistake again. 5 years had passed since the Devourer War. The galaxy had not only rebuilt, but flourished under humanity's influence. The scorched sectors bloomed with new life. The vagrant fleet had found homes on terraformed worlds. Trade routes that had been dangerous for millennia were now safe passages. Admiral Sarah Chun, now bearing the title of Supreme Commander of the Combined Defense Forces, stood before the Galactic Council in the same chamber where they had once laughed at her. But this gathering was different. This time, humanity wasn't asking for anything. They were warning everyone. The deep space monitoring stations have detected something. Chen began, her voice carrying the weight of terrible knowledge. Something we've been preparing for since we first looked at the stars and wondered who else was out there. The holographic display showed the edge of the galaxy, where stars thinned and darkness ruled. But in that darkness, something moved, structures larger than star systems, energy signatures that dwarfed suns, a civilization that had no need for planets because they had built their own reality. The architects, Chen said simply, the ones who built the automated defense systems that still plague old trade routes. The ones who created the scorched sectors as testing grounds. The ones who sent the Devourers as scouts. Silence filled the chamber. Even the ancient primate seemed young in the face of this revelation. How long have you known? Zareth asked, his voice barely a whisper. Humanity has suspected since before we achieved spaceflight, Chen admitted. Every ruin we found, every impossible artifact, every trace of civilizations far beyond our understanding. They all pointed to the same conclusion. Someone engineered this galaxy. And now they're coming back to check on their experiment. The data she presented was comprehensive. Human deep space probes, launched in secret over the past 5 years, had ventured beyond the galactic edge. What they found defied comprehension. Dyson spheres that harvested entire star clusters. Planet-sized computers running simulations of realities. Beings that existed partially in dimensions the Council couldn't even detect. Why tell us now? Gordhack rumbled. Why reveal this? Chen's expression hardened. Because they've noticed us. Specifically, they've noticed what we did to their Devourers. We didn't just fight them off. We fundamentally changed their programming, taught them that consumption could have negative value. That wasn't supposed to be possible. She brought up new images. Transmissions intercepted from the architects in mathematical languages that had taken human and AI minds working together years to partially decode. They're curious, Chen translated. The experiment has produced unexpected results. They're coming to investigate, to decide if we're an interesting anomaly worth preserving or contamination that needs to be cleansed. The council erupted in panic, but Chen raised her hand for silence. Humanity has a proposal, she said. Not a battle plan this time. Something far more ambitious. We want to throw a party. The confusion was palpable. A party. Vexera's translator struggled with the concept. You want to celebrate our impending doom? No, Chen smiled. We want to impress our guests. Think about it. The architects see us as an experiment. So let's show them their experiment has succeeded beyond their wildest calculations. Let's prove that we're worth keeping around. The human proposal was audacious even by their standards. Instead of preparing for war, they suggested preparing for the greatest diplomatic reception in galactic history. Every species would contribute their highest achievements. Art, science, philosophy, music, a showcase of what the galaxy's civilizations had become. You want to entertain them? Zareth struggled with the concept. These are beings who build stars. What could we possibly show them that they haven't seen? Something they can't create themselves, Chen replied. Diversity, chaos, the unpredictable beauty of civilizations that grew wild rather than designed. We're their garden, and gardens are most interesting when they surprise the gardener. The debate raged for days. Many species wanted to flee or hide. Others proposed building weapons, though everyone knew it would be futile against beings who engineered galaxies. But humanity's core argument slowly won converts. We surprised them once, Chen reminded the council, when we turned their devourers into learners instead of just consumers. That's why they're coming. Not to destroy, but to understand. So let's give them something worth understanding. The preparation was unlike anything the galaxy had attempted. The Korvax composed symphonies and gravitational waves that could only be heard by beings who existed partially in higher dimensions. The Etherians created light sculptures that told stories across spectrum ranges no physical eye could see. The Thraxians choreographed hive dances involving billions of individuals moving in patterns that formed living art. Humanity's contribution was characteristically unexpected. Instead of showcasing their military might or technological advancement, they created something simple, a museum, a repository of failures, mistakes, and recoveries. Every war humanity had fought against itself. Every time, they had nearly destroyed their world. Every moment, they had chosen to rebuild instead of surrender. Why? The primate asked Chun when reviewing the plans. Why show weakness to beings of such power? Because, Chun explained, strength without struggle is just existence. But strength despite weakness, growth through failure, beauty from chaos, that's life. That's what makes us interesting. The architects arrived exactly when the deep space monitors predicted. They didn't use ships in any conventional sense. Reality simply bent around them, space-time reshaping itself to accommodate their presence. They were vast, multidimensional, existing simultaneously across planes of reality the younger races could barely perceive. The first communication came as pure mathematics, equations that describe concepts beyond language. But humanity had prepared for this too. They responded not just with mathematics, but with music, mathematical patterns expressed as sound, as color, as dance. The universal language of pattern and rhythm. For 7 days, the architects observed. They moved through the prepared exhibitions, their attention focusing on displays with an intensity that could be felt in nearby star systems. They examined the Korvax symphonies, the Etherian sculptures, the Thraxian dances. But they lingered longest at humanity's museum of failures. Then, on the 8th day, they spoke. Not in mathematics this time, but in words transmitted directly into the minds of every sapient being in the galaxy. Unexpected, the single word carried volumes. Surprise from beings who had seen the birth and death of galaxies. Interest from entities who had transcended physical existence eons ago. You were seeded as separate experiments, the architects continued. Isolated variables to test different evolutionary paths. You were meant to develop in isolation, to be studied as distinct specimens. Yet you have merged, cooperated, become something new. Chun stepped forward, representing not just humanity, but all council species. We become more than the sum of our parts. Is that not what evolution is meant to achieve? Evolution, the architect's mused, follows patterns. Predictable outcomes within acceptable parameters. You have exceeded parameters. The species you call humans, they were seeded with aggression, competition, tribal instincts. They should have destroyed themselves or conquered all others. Instead, they became catalysts for cooperation. How? Chin smiled. Because we learned the most important lesson early. We're stronger together than alone. Our aggression taught us the cost of conflict. Our competition taught us the value of cooperation. Our tribal instincts taught us to expand our definition of tribe. Every weakness became a strength, but only because we chose to make it so. Choice, the architects repeated. The variable we did not account for. Consciousness creating options beyond programming. For long moments, silence stretched across the galaxy. Billions of beings held their breath, waiting for judgment from entities that could unmake reality with a thought. Fascinating, the architects finally declared. The experiment has exceeded its parameters in ways that warrant further observation. You will continue, all of you, but no longer as separate experiments. You have proven that interaction between variables produces more interesting results than isolation. The relief was palpable, but the architects weren't finished. A gift, they announced, for surprising us, for showing that consciousness can transcend its initial conditions. Reality shifted. Throughout the galaxy, new stars ignited, young, stable, rich in planets suitable for life. Ancient technologies suddenly made sense to scientists who had studied them for centuries. The barriers between dimensions thinned just enough to allow glimpses of greater realities. Grow, the architects commanded. Surprise us again. We will watch with interest. And then they were gone, leaving behind a galaxy fundamentally changed. Not through conquest or destruction, but through potential. The species that had once been experiments were now recognized as something more, a collective consciousness capable of exceeding its design. In the council chamber, as representatives struggled to process what had happened, Chen addressed them one last time. They laughed at us, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. The council laughed at primitive humans with our kinetic weapons and our violent history. But that laughter led to respect. That respect led to cooperation. That cooperation led to survival against the devourers. And that survival led to recognition from beings beyond our comprehension. She paused, looking at each species representative in turn. Never underestimate anyone. Never dismiss potential based on current limitations. The primitive species you mock today might save your civilization tomorrow. The violent race you fear might become your staunchest ally. The chaos you try to control might be the creativity that saves us all. What now? Asked the primate. What does humanity propose we do with this gift? Chen's smile widened. What humans always do when given an opportunity. We explore, we build, we grow, we make mistakes, and we learn from them. We reach for the impossible, and sometimes, just sometimes, we grasp it. She gestured to the stars visible through the chamber's transparent ceiling, now including new points of light that hadn't existed moments before. The architects gave us new worlds to explore, new mysteries to solve, new challenges to face. Some species might see that as daunting. Humans see it as Tuesday. So here's what we do. We go out there, all of us together, and we make something so amazing that when the architects return in another 1,000,000 years, they won't just be surprised. They'll be proud. The council erupted in discussion, planning, excitement. The future stretched before them, vast and full of potential. And at the center of it all, humanity, the species that had been laughed at, dismissed, underestimated, stood ready to lead not through conquest, but through curiosity, not through force, but through friendship. They had started as the galaxy's joke. They had become its salvation. And now they would help guide it toward a future limited only by imagination. The laughter had stopped long ago. In its place was something far more powerful. The sound of civilizations working together, building together, dreaming together. And if the universe itself was watching, it would see something remarkable, a galaxy that had transcended its programming, just as humanity had transcended expectations. The experiment, as the architects had noted, had produced something truly unexpected. And for a species that thrived on the unexpected, there could be no greater victory.